Welcome to another episode of the Crazy Reddit Stories podcast. In this episode, we dive into a jaw-dropping story about family, entitlement, and standing up for yourself when the pressure is on. What do you do when your parents expect you to fund their dream vacation, and they won't take no for an answer? We break down the wild twists and turns of one listener's experience, from guilt trips and passive-aggressive texts to enlisting other family members in the drama. Along the way, we explore the tough question of where to draw the line between love for your family and protecting your own boundaries. It's a relatable, eye-opening discussion about money, responsibility, and saying no without losing your mind or your relationships. Don't miss it. So, here's the deal. My parents called me last week, all excited, saying they've finally decided to take that dream vacation to Hawaii they've always talked about. I was genuinely happy for them until my dad casually dropped this gem. So, we were thinking you could cover it for us as a thank you for raising you. I thought he was joking. Nope, dead serious. I tried to laugh it off and said, yeah, right, like I can afford that. And my mom chimes in, well, you make good money now, don't you? You don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. You're in a position to help out. I work hard for what I earn, but I'm not rolling in money by any means. I have bills, rent, and I've been saving for my own stuff. But apparently, because I don't have kids and I'm just renting, I'm sitting on piles of cash. They start guilt-tripping me hard. My mom's like, you wouldn't even exist if it weren't for us. Don't you think we deserve to enjoy life after all we've sacrificed? And then my dad hits me with, if we were in your shoes, we'd do it for you in a heartbeat. It got worse. They even sent me the exact itinerary they'd picked out. Flights, a week-long stay at a fancy beachfront resort, and all these activities, snorkeling, helicopter rides, luau's. It added up to about $8,000. $8,000. When I told them no, my dad snapped and said I was being selfish. Selfish for not dropping several months of savings on their vacation. I love my parents, but this is insane. I asked them why they didn't save for this if it was such a dream of theirs. And my mom got all defensive, saying, we spent our money making sure you had a good life growing up. Now it's your turn to give back. At this point, I'm standing my ground, but the guilt trips haven't stopped. My mom's been sending me articles about why family matters more than money. And my dad's been texting me passive-aggressive stuff like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. Somehow, it's gotten so bad, I'm dreading their calls now. Am I crazy for thinking this is totally unreasonable? Like, who even does that? So after that phone call, I decided I needed to cool off and not respond for a bit. I figured they'd drop it and realize how ridiculous they were being. Spoiler, they did not. A few days later, I get this email from my mom with the subject line, your father and I are disappointed. Like, wow, starting strong. The email was a full essay about how ungrateful I was, how they'd sacrificed so much for me over the years, and how it's not about the money, it's about the gesture. At the end of the email, she even wrote, we're not asking for a handout. You could even put it on your credit card if you don't have the money right now. We know you'll get back on your feet eventually. My credit card? Like what? I ignored that email too, but then they tried a different tactic involving my sister. Now, my sister, bless her heart, is the golden child. Married with kids, owns a house, the whole 9 yards. She calls me up and says, hey, mom and dad told me you're being difficult about their vacation. Why don't you just help them out? It's not a big deal. Not a big deal? That's $8,000. I explained to her that I'm not in a position to drop that kind of money. Her response? Well, if you planned better, maybe you could have. I almost dropped my phone. Now I'm not only dealing with my parents, but my sister's acting like I'm the family villain. And it gets better. Apparently, my parents told her that I was being cold-hearted and making excuses. A few days later, they try to sweeten the deal. My dad calls and says, all right, listen, if the money's a problem, we'll let you come with us. Oh, I can go on the vacation I'm paying for? How generous. I told him flat out that I wasn't interested, and he just sighed like I was some ungrateful teenager. The cherry on top? They started hinting to other family members about this whole situation. My aunt called me the other night and said, oh, honey, it's just money. You can't take it with you. And they're not getting any younger. Like, am I missing something here? Is there a secret rule book that says kids are supposed to pay for their parents' luxury vacations? Now, I'm in this weird spot where I'm second-guessing myself. I've always been close with my parents, but this is crossing a line, right? Like, it's one thing to help out with something serious. But a Hawaiian vacation? I love them, but I'm not a walking bank account. At this point, I'm considering going no contact for a while. It's exhausting. Every time my phone buzzes, I brace myself for another guilt trip. I keep wondering, how did it come to this? They're supposed to be the ones who have my back, and now they're just treating me like an ATM. It's not even about the money anymore. It's about sheer entitlement. And honestly, it's making me see them in a completely different light. So after weeks of this nonsense, I finally decided enough was enough. I called a family meeting over Zoom because, frankly, I couldn't deal with the constant guilt tripping through calls, emails, and random family members chiming in. I told them we needed to have a serious talk. When we got on the call, my parents looked all smug like they thought this was the moment I was going to cave. My sister even joined, probably to play referee or double down on the "you're selfish" narrative. I started calmly, because yelling wasn't going to get me anywhere, and said, "Look, I love you guys and I appreciate everything you've done for me, but this whole situation is completely unfair. You're asking me to foot the bill for a vacation I didn't plan, I wasn't involved in deciding, and honestly, I can't afford. I've told you no multiple times, and you're still pushing. Why?" There was this awkward silence. And then my mom launched into her "we raised you, we sacrificed everything for you" speech for what felt like the 100th time. I stopped her and said, "I get that. I really do. And I'm grateful. But raising your kids isn't something you hold over their heads later. You don't get to demand $8,000 as a reward for doing what parents are supposed to do." My dad jumped in, saying, "It's not a demand, it's a request. We thought you'd want to show your appreciation." And that's when I finally snapped. I told them, appreciation doesn't mean paying for something I can't afford just because you want it. I'm not your retirement plan, and I'm not your financial safety net. If you've always wanted this vacation, you should have saved for it. It's not my responsibility to make up for your lack of planning. My sister tried to chime in, saying something about how I was being dramatic, but I cut her off too. This has nothing to do with you, and I'm sick of you inserting yourself like you're the family spokesperson. You're not paying for this either. So why do you even care? The call ended with my parents looking completely shocked, like they couldn't believe I'd actually stood up to them. My sister texted me after, calling me rude and immature, but honestly, I don't care. It's been a few days since that conversation, and I haven't heard a peep from my parents. No texts, no emails, nothing. Part of me feels bad because I hate conflict, and I know this probably hurt them. But another part of me feels free for the first time in weeks. If they come around and want to have a normal, healthy relationship, great. But if this is how they're going to act every time they don't get their way, then maybe I need to rethink how much access they have to my life. Because at the end of the day, family doesn't mean being a doormat. And I refuse to set the precedent that they can guilt me into paying for their dreams at the expense of my own.